We live in a world where everyone has something to say, but very few people truly understand the power of staying quiet. What if silence is not weakness, but one of the strongest tools you will ever possess? And what if knowing when to stay silent could change your success, your relationships, and your personal growth? We are surrounded by constant noise. Social media never sleeps. News runs 24 hours a day. Notifications pull at our attention nonstop. In all this noise, we have lost something incredibly valuable. We have lost the power of silence. But silence is not just the absence of sound. Silence is a force. It is a tool. And when you learn how to use it, the results can be life-changing. Today, I want to share 7 specific situations where silence is not just helpful, but absolutely essential. These are moments where staying quiet can make or break your success, your relationships, and the way you grow as a person. Let us begin with the first situation. When you do not have all the facts. In this age of endless information, we feel pressure to speak quickly. We rush to share opinions, judgments, and reactions. But ask yourself this. How many times have you spoken up, only to realize later that you did not have the full picture? How often have you jumped to conclusions, only to discover you were completely wrong? One of the clearest signs of true wisdom is the ability to say, "I do not know." It takes courage to admit that you do not yet have all the pieces. In those moments, silence becomes your greatest ally. When you stay quiet without all the facts, your silence speaks volumes. It says you are thoughtful. It says you are patient. It says you refuse to rush to judgment. In a world obsessed with instant reactions and loud opinions, that kind of restraint is rare, and rare qualities carry real value. This does not mean you should never speak unless you are 100% certain. That is not the point. The real question to ask before you speak is simple. Do I truly have enough information to add something meaningful to this conversation? If the answer is no, silence is often the wiser choice. Success and personal growth are not about always having the right answer. They are about having the wisdom to recognize when you do not. In those moments, silence becomes a powerful tool for learning, for growth, and for building trust with others. When you choose silence, you create space. Space for others to share. Space for you to listen and learn. Space for the full truth to reveal itself. And it is in that space where real understanding begins. Now let us move to the second situation where silence becomes crucial. When you are angry. When anger gets out of control, it can burn everything in its path. Relationships, reputations, even long-term success can be damaged in a single moment. When we are angry, we are not thinking clearly. Emotions run high, the body reacts, and words come out faster than wisdom. Too often, those words cannot be taken back. They leave scars that last far longer than the anger itself. That is why, in moments of anger, silence becomes your greatest protector. It shields you from saying something you will regret. It guards the bridges you spent years building. Silence does not weaken you in these moments. It protects what matters most. Now, you might be thinking that anger needs to be expressed, not suppressed. And you are right. Anger should not be buried or ignored. But there is a time and a place for expression, and that time is not in the heat of the moment. When anger is at its peak, the instinct is to react immediately, to let everyone know exactly how you feel. But the most successful people do something different. They pause. They breathe. They give themselves time to cool down. In that brief silence, wisdom begins to surface. Solutions become clearer. Judgment starts to return. Anger tends to paint everything in extremes, black or white, right or wrong. Yet most truth lives in the space between. Silence gives you access to that perspective. There is something else worth considering. When you respond to anger with silence, you are not only protecting yourself, you are also disarming the situation. You refuse to add fuel to the fire. And in doing so, you create room for resolution, understanding, and growth. This is not easy. Choosing silence when emotions are burning takes real strength and real discipline. But it is a discipline that pays dividends in every area of life. Think about your personal relationships. How many arguments could have been avoided by taking a moment of silence before responding? In your professional life, how many damaged connections could have been saved by pausing before sending that angry message? Silence in the face of anger is not weakness. It is strength. It is wisdom. It is the mark of someone who controls their emotions instead of being controlled by them. And when you are in control of your emotions, you are in control of your life. You make decisions guided by reason, not reaction. When you reach the point where you can respond to situations instead of reacting to them, real control begins. That brings us to the third situation where silence becomes absolutely essential. When you feel tempted to make excuses. Excuses can feel comfortable. They are easy to reach for and familiar to use. But here's the truth. Excuses are the building blocks of failure. Life will always present challenges. Obstacles are inevitable. And in those moments, it is tempting to say it was not my fault. I had no choice. There was nothing I could do. But every time you make an excuse, you give away your power. You are quietly telling yourself that you are not in control, that circumstances are in charge of your life. And that mindset leads nowhere worth going. That is why, when excuses start forming, silence becomes your greatest ally. Silence gives you a chance to pause, to take responsibility, and to reclaim your power. It creates space to ask a better question. What can I do about this? You might be thinking that sometimes things truly are beyond your control. And that is true. Life can throw unexpected challenges that no one could have predicted. But even then, excuses do not serve you. Successful people do not waste energy explaining why something failed. They do not point fingers or blame circumstances. Instead, they reflect. They ask themselves what they can learn. They consider how they can grow. They look for what they can do differently next time. In that moment of silence and reflection, real growth begins. That is where solutions start to appear. That is where you begin to take ownership of your life. Think about it. How many times have excuses robbed you of a chance to improve? How often have circumstances been blamed, only for someone else to succeed under the same conditions? When you choose silence over excuses, you are choosing responsibility. You are choosing empowerment. You are choosing growth. This choice is not always easy. Making excuses is comfortable. Avoiding responsibility feels safe. But comfort is the enemy of growth. Comfort stands in the way of success. When you remain silent instead of making excuses, you are making a powerful statement. You are saying that you are in control of your life, responsible for your progress, and capable of overcoming obstacles. That mindset opens doors. It creates opportunities. It turns intentions into action. And now, let us move on to the fourth situation where silence becomes absolutely crucial. Now let us move to the fourth situation where silence becomes absolutely essential. When you feel tempted to gossip. Gossip is everywhere. It shows up in workplaces, social circles, and even within families. It can feel tempting, even enjoyable in the moment, like a sweet treat. But make no mistake, gossip is toxic. It slowly poisons trust, damages relationships, and destroys reputations. And not just the reputation of the person being talked about. It damages yours as well. That is why, when gossip calls your name, silence becomes your greatest protector. Silence shields your relationships. It safeguards your integrity. It keeps you from stepping into conversations that cost far more than they ever give. You might be thinking that sometimes we need to talk about other people to process what we experience. And that is true. But there is a clear difference between a thoughtful, constructive conversation and gossip. Gossip is not about solving problems or improving situations. Gossip exists to make us feel better by putting someone else down. When you choose silence over gossip, you send a powerful message. You show respect for others. You demonstrate integrity. You rise above small, careless talk. In a world where gossip is common, that kind of character stands out. It gets noticed. It earns respect. Ask yourself this. Who do you trust more? The person who always has the latest story about someone else, or the person who refuses to engage in that kind of conversation? Who would you rather work with? Who would you rather call a friend? When you stay silent in the face of gossip, you are not only protecting others. You are protecting yourself. You are building a reputation as someone who can be trusted, someone who respects others, someone with dignity and class. And over time, that reputation becomes far more valuable than any brief satisfaction gossip might offer. This is not always easy. In a world fueled by rumors and whispers, choosing silence can feel uncomfortable. At times, it may even feel isolating. But it is worth it. Because when you refuse to gossip, you create space for something better. You make room for genuine connections, meaningful conversations, and relationships built on trust and respect. That is where real success lives. Not in knowing the latest rumors, but in being known as a person of integrity. Not in tearing others down, but in lifting them up. not in spreading negativity, but in encouraging something positive. Now let us move on to the fifth situation where silence becomes absolutely crucial. When you feel the urge to interrupt. Interrupting has become common in our fast-paced world. Everyone is rushing, eager to speak, quick to jump in. But interrupting is more than poor manners. It is a barrier to true understanding. Interrupting creates distance. It blocks connection and becomes an obstacle on the path to success. When we interrupt someone, we are not just cutting off their words. We are cutting off their thoughts, their ideas, and their perspective. The message we send is simple and dangerous. What I have to say matters more than what you are saying. That is why, when you feel the urge to interrupt, silence becomes your greatest teacher. Silence gives you the chance to listen, to understand, and to gain perspectives you would otherwise miss. You might be thinking that sometimes interruption is necessary. What if the conversation is going off track? And yes, there are moments when guiding a discussion is appropriate. But more often than not, the urge to interrupt comes from impatience, not necessity. Truly successful people understand the power of listening. They know that every person they meet knows something they do not. They see every conversation as an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to expand their understanding. When you choose silence over interruption, you are making a powerful choice. You choose to be a learner instead of just a speaker. You choose to value another person's perspective as much as your own. In a world where everyone is talking and very few are truly listening, this kind of presence is rare. And rare qualities carry real value. Ask yourself, who do you enjoy talking to more? Someone who constantly interrupts, or someone who listens and gives you the space to fully express yourself? When you stay silent instead of interrupting, you do more than show good manners. You build deeper connections. You encourage understanding. You create an environment where ideas can grow, creativity can thrive, and real communication can take place. This is not always easy. In a fast-paced world, listening fully before responding can feel like swimming against the current. It takes patience. It takes self-control. It takes genuine interest in others. But it is worth it. When you give someone your full attention, when you allow them to finish their thoughts, you are not only showing respect. You are opening the door to new ideas, new perspectives, and new opportunities. And often, the thought you were so eager to interrupt with becomes stronger, clearer, or even completely transformed once you truly listen. What you gain when you choose to listen instead is far more valuable than what you rush to say. Silence in the face of the urge to interrupt is not passive. It is active. It is intentional. It is the choice to be fully present, to absorb, and to truly understand. That level of presence, that kind of engagement, is what separates great communicators from average ones. It is also what separates lasting success from short-lived achievement. Now let us move to the sixth situation where silence becomes absolutely essential. When you are receiving feedback. Feedback is a gift, even when it does not feel like one. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable, even painful, because none of us enjoys hearing about our mistakes or weaknesses. But the truth is simple. Feedback, especially when it is hard to hear, is one of the most powerful tools for growth and success. It acts like a mirror, showing not only who you are today, but who you have the potential to become. That is why, when feedback comes your way, silence becomes your greatest ally. Silence gives you the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to see yourself through someone else's perspective. You might be thinking that you need to defend yourself. What if the feedback is wrong? And yes, sometimes feedback can be incomplete or misguided. But your first response should still be silence. Our natural instinct is to explain, justify, or push back. Yet when we react too quickly, we often miss the valuable truth hidden within the feedback. Choosing silence in these moments is a powerful decision. You choose growth over ego. You choose improvement over defensiveness. You choose to remain a lifelong learner instead of someone who believes they already have everything figured out. In a world where many people resist feedback, that openness to growth stands out. It is a defining trait of truly successful individuals. Think about it. Who do you respect more? Someone who always has a defense ready, or someone who listens carefully, reflects thoughtfully, and uses feedback as a tool for improvement? When you remain silent while receiving feedback, you are not simply being polite. You are creating space for reflection. You allow yourself to truly hear what is being said, to evaluate it calmly, and to extract the lessons it offers. In that silence, real growth begins. That is where transformation takes place. That is where you start unlocking your full potential. This does not mean you must accept every piece of feedback without question. Not at all. But before you respond, before you defend, before you explain, silence gives you the clarity to choose your next step wisely. When feedback comes your way, pause. Be silent. Listen carefully. Reflect. In that quiet moment, ask yourself a few important questions. What can I learn from this feedback, even if I disagree with it? Is there a grain of truth here? How can this help me improve? When you approach feedback with silence and reflection, you are not just working on yourself. You are also strengthening your relationships. You show others that their input matters, that you are open to growth, and that you are committed to continuous improvement. And that mindset is what separates average results from extraordinary ones. It is what divides those who plateau from those who keep rising, growing, and reaching new levels of success. Now let us move to the seventh and final situation where silence is absolutely essential. When you are celebrating your achievements. Yes, even in moments of victory, silence has its place. This does not mean you should not celebrate success. Achievements deserve recognition and appreciation. But there is a difference between quiet confidence and loud pride. When success arrives, it can be tempting to announce it to everyone, to make sure the world knows what you have accomplished. But true success, lasting success, speaks for itself. It does not need constant attention. When you choose silence around your achievements, you demonstrate humility. You show that you do not rely on constant validation from others. Your satisfaction comes from the achievement itself, not from applause. In a world driven by self-promotion and public praise, this kind of quiet confidence stands out. It earns respect. It inspires others. It shows strength without noise. So here they are. The 7 moments where silence is not just helpful, but essential. When you do not have all the facts. When you are angry. When you are tempted to make excuses. When you are tempted to gossip. When you feel the urge to interrupt. When you are receiving feedback. And when you are celebrating your achievements. Master silence in these moments, and watch your life begin to change. Watch your relationships grow deeper. Watch your influence expand. Watch your success rise to new levels. Because in a world that never stops talking, the ability to be truly silent is a rare power. And that power is available to every one of us. I wish you good health, lasting happiness, and steady growth on your journey. If this message resonated with you, remember to subscribe to Mindset Daily so we can continue growing stronger together.